Welcome to Shots with Katherine. Joe, thank you so much for joining us and being here today. Could you just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you and your journey as a filmmaker?
Hi, Katherine. Happy to be here. To virtually be here. Let's see. For me, like writing and making movies is kind of like I consider them the same thing. It's hard to figure out when I first started wanting to make movies versus when I first wanted to start writing because they kind of just go together. I started writing probably when I was like 12 and I started making movies about that same time, if not earlier. I think part of it is my mom was a English teacher and very creative and was kind of obsessed with stories, and she homeschooled me and my brothers, so we were very around this creative environment all the time, and she would like read literature to us at every lunch. We were always like surrounded by stories, and then on our free time me and my brothers would run around with sticks in the backyard acting out movies or books or stories and making them up. So that's kind of how it started. Pretty much the first movie I made was with this little tiny camera that was designed for filming Legos. It was called a little program called Lego Studios, and you would film your Legos and like do stop motion or live action with your Legos and make a little movie with that. So it's kind of what I cut my teeth on as a child.
I love that because for me too, as a DP, it was something that I got into because I loved storytelling. Because as a kid, I always had my nose in a book, and I was doing the same thing. I was going and playing and living in these fantasy worlds that I would just build in my head. And so it was always the storytelling aspect of it. And so for me, the way that I most naturally connected to that was visually, but it all came back to the love of the story. And it's so great to hear that it's the same for you. It's just that desire to tell stories.
And I think movies, part of the beautiful thing of movies is that it's the most lifelike out of any entertainment media. Like it most closely resembles what you see in real life. Now, books have other advantages, like you're participating more in the book because you're actively reading it and imagining it. Whereas in a movie, you're kind of what you see is what you get. Although there's still some imagination involved watching movies, I think, if you're doing it right. But it's a really fun medium.
And what kinds of stories would you say tend to resonate with you the most?
Well, I grew up on Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, so like crazy high concept sci-fi and fantasy like really gets me. Stuff like with these big, epic, wild imaginative ideas is part of my favorite thing. So really like what would be called in the biz, I guess, high concept is something I really like. And then as I, grew up, I got interested in some of more of these more, indie dramas and Oscar baity stuff and coming of age stuff. And so I'm actually a fan of when you can somehow marry the two of those. I would argue Stranger Things gets close to that. It's not, I wouldn't call it Oscar baity, but it deals with interesting emotions and really character focused, but it's still like crazy and high concept and like ridiculously, imaginative.
Right. It's basically a serious drama at heart, but then it has these fantasy and these horror elements, I think is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not a big fan of like something where it's very surface level, just action.
Right. I know I've definitely seen movies where I felt like I really wanted to like it, or I liked a lot of the things about it, but at the end it just fell flat because the story wasn't there. I remember movies where I've left thinking, wow, that cinematography was amazing. The score was incredible. The acting was so good, but just, it was so meh. Why couldn't it have been just a little bit better? It's almost as bad as those movies where you watch them and you're loving it 90% of the way through, but then the ending just falls flat and kind of ruins the whole thing.
Yeah, you're just like, oh, well, you ended it like that? Okay.
What is your creative process like as a director? How do you go about visualizing the story and the world?
I mean, I do a lot of visualizing the world when I'm writing. And sometimes I get annoyingly specific in the script about how a character says something or what their attitude is or what tick they do in conversation or how they're moving. Because to me, I'm trying to simulate a natural conversation. And there's a huge difference between saying, yeah, and yeah. My director thinking starts when I'm writing the script. And then on set, it's more trying to, again, kind of make sure the actors understand what's going on in the script. Talking to the actors like, so what do you think is going on in the scene? Like, why are they saying this stuff? because it's always clear to me, but that's because I wrote it, you know?
Of course. Maybe there's rare moments. Maybe directors wish that there were rare moments when other people could read their minds. So
Yeah.
I think for the most part, I'm just pretty glad, Joe, that nobody can read my mind.
Oh, same. I try to present myself as a nice person, but sometimes in my mind I'm not a nice person. So
I mean, I talk to myself all the time when I'm alone, and the biggest thing I'm telling myself is, don't be creepy.
don't be creepy, don't be creepy.
Was that creepy? Is this creepy? Nah, you're fine. That was creepy. Or it's okay if you do that, but if you do that, that'll be creepy.
That's awesome. That's funny. Yeah, what else with the creative process? I mean, part of it's working with a cinematographer. That's the one thing that I found is interesting. Like right now I'm writing a graphic novel instead of a screenplay, partially because it's something I'm interested in and wanting to kind of dive into, and partially because there's a little bit less of a harsh gatekeeping culture around graphic novels than there is around screenwriting. Whereas like in screenwriting, a lot of times it's a struggle to get, even an agent to read your email pitch about your script. Whereas a lot of times graphic novel companies, you can submit your script straight to the publisher. Writing a graphic novel, I found, is very different because you're basically storyboarding and writing a script at the same time, because you have to describe each panel and what's happening in each panel. So you're basically making a shot list. And that's something I don't really do as much in screenwriting, in that I leave a lot more up to the cinematographer. How do you guys think that we can convey this mood? Like, this is what I'm trying to get across in this scene. And then sometimes I get ideas of my own, but they're not necessarily any better. In fact, frequently they're worse than a DP's vision. So I don't have to pretend that I know what to do all the time with the camera angles. One of the first things I directed was a dark comedy / horror spoof movie in high school. And basically me and my friends just did it one summer, and it was intentionally bad because we knew we didn't really have the skills yet to make like a really good movie. And we were trying to make like the cheesiest, stupidest horror movie we could think of. And we filmed it in black and white, and we were trying to like I, at one point, my cousin was acting in it, and she was like actually a pretty good actress. And at one point I told her I'm like, no, you're acting too well. Like, make your scream more fake and stupid sounding.
I'm too convinced that you're actually scared.
Right. Yeah. I was like, that seems like you were actually dying. Don't do that. No, like make it more, showy. So that one was a lot of fun. It's a like, kind of like a monster in the house eating all these people, and like it's like black and white. So we're like kind of doing like an old cheesy horror movie kind of thing. But the monster in the house is like a little Papillon dog, these like little perky-eared fluff balls that are just like really cute and
okay,
dainty.
I'm gonna Google that. How do I spell that? Oh, they're so cute and floofy. Okay, I see what you mean.
So yeah, it had a Papillon as like this horrific, quote unquote, horrific monster that was killing everyone. But yeah, that was pretty much my first. And then I did some short films in college that really weren't very good, to be honest.
Don't be honest. Tell everybody that your shit's amazing.
My shit's amazing, guys. Well, I mean, I was ambitious in my college short films. I did one where it was trying to be like a short film that covered like a whole feature film's worth of plot in like a trailer montage style, and it was sci-fi and fantasy. And let's just say I did not have the resources to really pull that off. And like everyone was like really supportive of my idea, and they're like, oh yeah, and like we'll help you build the set and do all this stuff. And like I just didn't direct it very well. But it's how you learn, I've done 2 features, and one of them is in post-production currently. So yeah.
I got the one that's currently in post.
Yes, and the cinematography is just delightful. I'm not just saying that because Katherine's on the line. That's what like makes me happy when viewing this footage, is just the colors, man. The light and the colors. It's like, it geeks me out. So yes.
So much fun to work on, and we're going to talk about that in the second half of this interview, so stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Yes. My first feature I filmed right out of college, and my college, or the university I went to, Spring Arbor University in Michigan, one of my former professors helped me produce it. We had the cooperation of the film department. Like, students were getting, like senior year students were getting like internship credit for working on my film, and they gave me like free locations and even they lent me some equipment, I think, occasionally as well. So I probably wouldn't have been able to make it if it wasn't for my family chipping in and then my college chipping in. That one was a lot of fun though. That one's called Love is Blind. It's actually streaming on Amazon Prime. It's, I think, released in, I want to say 2000. Well, it's complicated when it was released because our first showing was in 2015, but it didn't get on Amazon until like 2018 maybe. So I think it's listed as under 2018. Considering the resources we had at the time, I think we did a good job on it. There's definitely things I would do differently, especially choosing some of the locations I would have chosen very differently. But I really enjoyed doing that, and I kind of want to go back to writing something a little lighter like that in the near future, because since then I've written a lot more like heavy, dark, brooding things, which is a lot of fun, but sometimes in life you need something a little more cheery.
I think when it comes towards stuff that I watch, not stuff that I work on, funny enough, but I tend to gravitate towards watching more comedies and more fun comedy or fantasy type of things. But when it comes to shooting, I shoot more drama and horror and music videos and dark stuff, which is funny. I think when I'm seeking entertainment, I want to forget about how depressing and gritty real life is, and I want to watch something that's funny and lighthearted, or just something that will take me away and put me in a completely different world. So even if it's not a comedy, if it's at least putting me in this vibrant new world.
Right. Like something very imaginative, like sci-fi or fantasy. That's why it's great.
Yeah, but I love shooting drama, and I love shooting horror, and I love shooting gritty, dark things. I love shooting projects where I can really build a world, where there's a lot of emotion, where there's a world to be built, basically.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, what do you like shooting? How do you like shooting dramas? Because I mean, you said that's one of your favorite things to shoot. And as a director, when I'm doing a drama, I always struggle to think of, well, how can we make this visually interesting though? Because a lot of dramas is just people talking to each other a lot of times. So like, what do you look for in a drama script, or how do you like adapt a drama script into something that you think is like gonna pop on screen?
Well, when it comes to drama, it's so emotionally driven. And so with a good drama, even if it's just people talking in a room, there's still so much that you can do compositionally and with lighting, just how you frame it, where you place the characters in the shot, whether there's foreground elements or not, whether it's a deep depth of field, shallow depth of field. There's so many little things that you can do to a shot to convey a certain emotion. And I think dramas are always really interesting to shoot, because even if there's not a lot necessarily going on in terms of activity and people moving around, there's so much going on emotionally that you can always build a world and build a mood with the shots. And a fantastic example of this, I would say, is from one of my favorite cinematographers, somebody who's really inspired me, Bruno Delbonnel. He's a French cinematographer. And the project in question that I'm talking about now is Darkest Hour. It was that film. It was nominated for Best Cinematography and a bunch of other Oscars a few years ago, where Gary Oldman played Winston Churchill. And
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was nominated for Best Cinematography Oscar as well. But he is just a fantastic, brilliant DP. He has this very distinctive style, great composition, great color contrast, this beautiful mix of contrast and soft lighting, and his stuff feels both gritty and dreamy and almost surreal at the same time, and it's just beautiful. And the thing with Darkest Hour was that movie, so much of that movie was a bunch of old men yelling at each other in Parliament or in a bunch of underground bunkers. I mean, yes, a good 70 to 80, 90% of that movie was a bunch of old British guys yelling at each other, and it was brilliantly dynamic and interesting and well shot. And I think that movie definitely for me is a fantastic example of how you can take something that might seem relatively simple in terms of activity, but because you have a rich, dramatic storyline, still make it so visually compelling and dynamic and build a world with it, like in that film.
That's very cool. I'm gonna have to watch that movie and like sometime and have that in mind. Look out for that while watching it.
I think it definitely speaks to somebody being a fantastically talented cinematographer if they can make shots of a bunch of old guys in Parliament shouting at each other seem interesting for a long period of time. I mean,
Yeah.
hats off to Mr. Bruno Delbon. He's brilliant. He also shot the sixth Harry Potter movie, which was, I believe, the only Harry Potter movie that was nominated for a cinematography Oscar. So, and then he shot Amelie. I mean, he's shot some pretty amazing stuff.
Oh yeah, that's really visually interesting. Yeah. The other thing that I thought was interesting is as a young filmmaker, like really early on, I always just chalked up any visual interest just to cinematography. And making 2 indie features where you have to like really be everyone's helping with everything, I realized that like if you really want your colors and stuff to pop, you got to be the set design and costume design's got to be supporting that, because a lot of times, and I mean, I'm a big fan of solid colors. So like someone having just a bright yellow shirt on, or someone having a bright red hat, something that really just pops. And that a lot of those choices are made, before you start shooting. So that's always interesting to play into it. And that my first film, Love Is Blind, the whole idea was to make it a very sort of warm and bright film, and that was our shot composition and lighting played into that, and our color grading played into that. We had like a warm tint over everything, but so did the costume selection and the location selection even.